Team at Inquiry Tracker, where each episode we examine the way we teach, listen and learn from primary education through to university and beyond. If students are using AI in school, they're cheating, right?
Or are they?
I'm Mike Loader.
And I'm Greg Campitelli.
Welcome to Beyond Education. It's good to be back once again. Of course, this program is presented by the team at Inquiry Tracker, where each episode we examine the way we teach, listen and learn from primary education through to university and beyond. Today we're diving into the rise of AI, the question of originality, and yes, even asking, is using AI a form of cheating? Joining me as always is my co-host and co-founder of Inquiry Tracker, Greg Campitelli. Good to see you.
Always good to be in the studio, Mike. And yes, is AI cheating or is it not cheating? Let me ask you a couple of questions, Mike.
Please.
Firstly, is using a calculator in mathematics cheating?
No, I loved my calculator in high school.
What about English spell check? Can you do that?
Yes, without spell check I would, I'd need a lot of assistance.
In science, what about using the internet to do research?
I vote for that too.
Google Maps, can you use that for geography?
I use it to get here.
And finally, what about Duolingo to learn a language?
I've certainly given it a go, but my Spanish isn't as good as it should be. Soy un hombre muy honrado que me gusta lo mejor que viene el tequila blanco.
Wow.
I said something about tequila.
Really, they're practical tools, right?
Yes.
They're practical tools to do our job better, and really, AI is another tool.
Yeah.
And I know it's a big, scary tool, and it's challenging education like nothing before. But for me, it's about a challenge that's facing teachers, perhaps like something they've never previously witnessed.
Yeah, absolutely. When that first came through the gates, and you and I have talked about it before, I just thought, how are you going to do it? If it writes essays, it writes facts,
It can do a lot, right?
Yeah.
And there's lots of issues, but 5 of them for me right now are academic integrity, this idea of AI misuse by students to perhaps deliver an essay that they say that is their own.
Yep.
There's an equity issue as well, like not everyone has access to laptops and internet, students of course. Teacher preparedness, often the students are more advanced than we are in terms of this space. There's this bias in AI systems. AI learn. Now, if they're learning from a biased environment, that can be challenging for us. And finally, that idea of curriculum integration. We've got to change the way we deliver education based on the tool now available to us. But probably a perfect time to bring in our expert witness and guest.
Absolutely. Now, with over 30 years in global education, Janet is a respected voice in Edtech. As founder of Jannic Education Solutions, she leads vital conversations on AI, policy and ethics. Her insights connect classroom realities with modern teaching practices that nurture critical and creative thinking. Janet Moeller joins us in studio now. It's good to see you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. It's great to see you, Mike and Greg. Thank you for bringing me on Beyond Education.
It's an absolute pleasure. Mike.
Janet, help us out. Let's dive in and zero in on this hot topic. With the rise of AI, should parents and educators be fearful of cheating?
Oh, big maybe.
Okay.
Look, students have been cheating for decades, probably centuries. And there was a study that came out by Challenge Success, it's an educational nonprofit, that found that 60 to 70% of high schoolers were cheating before AI, before ChatGPT even came in. And what they're finding now is that in some ways the cheating has decreased just slightly. They're not cheating more, but they're cheating differently.
Right.
So, and I guess if we back up, we have to think about our motivations for that. What are the motivations for students cheating in the first place? Because I'll put you on the spot. Did either of you ever cheat in your spelling tests?
Of course. I would have cheated once or twice at school. I did. I rang up a mate to get the answers. But by and large, no. But sometimes, yes.
Yeah. And so I remember when I first started teaching, and I was a young teacher, I saw a girl cheat on her spelling test. And when I asked her about that, she started crying and she said, I practiced last night and my mom's going to get me in trouble if I don't get them all right. And those motivations for cheating over the centuries have been not wanting to let someone down,
True.
not wanting to get in trouble, and feeling like they're going to look stupid.
Correct.
Yeah, true.
So I guess the question that we have as educators, but as parents as well, is how do we create a safe environment where students are not, they know that we love them if they do their best.
Yeah.
They know that they're not going to get in trouble if they make mistakes, and we're not going to set up an environment that makes them look dumb.
Yeah, true. Now, I hear that there are sort of plagiarism detectors and there's AI detectors to see, hey, that looks like it's been delivered by AI. Is this true?
Oh, they are. They've never been good. They're only getting worse.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
The false positives are rampant. So to understand what AI is doing, AI is checking to see if your writing is AI-ish. And it can tell if your AI-ish writing is if it's predictable. So for example, if I write a sentence, I would like a cup of
tea,
coffee.
Those are normal answers. Those are predictable answers. You might be AI, because that's what AI would say. If I wrote a sentence, I would like a cup of bananas. That's going to get past the radar because AI will say I would never have used
It doesn't make sense.
bananas. Yeah, it wouldn't have been predictable in that sense. The other thing that AI knows is that AI-generated sentences tend to be pretty uniform.
Yes.
Whereas human conversation will have long sentences, short sentences, that sort of thing. So when you think about those things, the idea of predictable text and sentence length, you have to think about the bias that you were talking about against students if English is not their native language.
Totally.
So we've got the vocabulary there. They might have done the thinking on their own. They might have done the research on their own. They've drafted it. They put it through. And there was a study by Andrews that came out just in 2023 that took all the false positives, like those papers that were falsely flagged as using AI. 61% of non-native English students were flagged for falsely flagged for using AI, where only 5% of the native English speakers were falsely flagged.
That's alarming.
And makes sense, because that could be a difficult sort of thing to work out. I mean, these machines are smart, but they're obviously learning and, as you say, creating these biases as well. The key question, though, is how do schools and teachers adapt to this changing sort of landscape, right?
So hard. Gosh.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is you can expect that no matter which AI plagiarism detector you use, it can get bypassed. So there are actually TikTok videos now that are made on, you know, it will say make a few spelling mistakes or write using the phrases of a non-native English speaker. So there's lots of ways to bypass that. I think if teachers try to set up a punitive environment, it just sets up a culture of mistrust. So in our traditional school system, I would argue, unintentionally incentivizes cheating.
Yeah.
So what we do is we stand in front of the classroom and we chalk and talk, is what we say. And it's almost like we're opening their heads. We're trying to pour in a whole bunch of information. And then we ask them to regurgitate it all on a test. And then we rank them based on how well they regurgitate information.
Yes, I remember how well that went for me.
Which has been the traditional approach for education for last 200 years, right?
It really has. And so what are we incentivizing? They're afraid of getting in trouble. They're afraid of not doing well. So we've been incentivizing that for a while. The really forward-thinking schools, though, are working on focusing critical thinking and creative thinking. So doing activities that have those. For example, you were talking about calculators before. I don't know, when I was in school, we had to draw a lot of graphs in math. Back in algebra, and those spent hours getting the lines right. Well, now that we have graphing calculators, they can spend some time on critical and creative thinking by giving students a question: what would happen if I turn that x negative? What's going to happen to my graph?
And what's the interpretation of it?
And what happens? Now check it with your calculator, and what happens with the y. And so you've got that critical and creative, bigger thinking to do more things that were possible. When Google came in, the forward-thinking teachers were looking at issues from multiple perspectives. Let's check who's a reputable source, who's not, what background do they come from. How do we know that we're getting good information? Which is a lot like what they need to do with AI now.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's bring it back to the practice, right? We've got teachers in schools working. Talk to us about the practical changes that we might see in schools, let's say over the next 1 to 3 years, because it's evolving perhaps faster than we can keep up with, right? So I don't want to dare say the next 10 years because no one knows. But let's talk about the next year to 3. What do you think?
Sure. I think a lot of focus right now is going into AI literacy. And what that means, in short, is helping students understand what AI is good at and what it's not good at, and therefore where it's good to use and where it's not so good to use. I'll give you an example that you can try at home. Everyone at home can try as well. If you go onto ChatGPT and you ask it to make an image of a map of Europe, try that.
Okay.
At first glance, it'll seem okay, but then if you look more carefully, there'll be some countries missing, misspelled, some very random things in there. And then if you want to take it a deeper level, you can ask it to analyze the mistakes that it made on its map, and it will list for you all the mistakes that it made. and then ask it to regenerate the map again and fix the mistakes, it will fix those mistakes, but then make more that it didn't make the first time.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, can you trust an image generator? For what, when, how? There are teachers that are having essay prompts and in class asking students in all your different devices, have ChatGPT write your essay. And some of you have Claude and some of you have Gemini.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And every single one of the essays, no matter how they were written, will be different.
Of course it will be.
But if you take that and you start critically thinking about, why would this essay say this on my computer and this one say that on your computer? What has it learned about you already? What is it getting right based on what you know? What's accurate, what's not? Look at the sources. Are they real sources? Because sometimes those sources link to things that they're actually not linking to. And then you can also critically look at them and say, well, what did this essay include that you might not have thought about? All right, so now let's take out pencil and pen and make an outline of what you think the essay should be, using all your knowledge, using what they've done or not done, and then write the essay from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a decent solution.
I mean, it's not dissimilar to, you do your Shakespearean study of Macbeth, and then you've got your Cole's notes that someone's interpreting all the themes, and you use that as the reference point.
Go back to that scene, have a look,
Yeah.
let's perform that again, hit that.
And do the essay again based on it as a resource.
It's ironic that this technology is probably going to produce a little bit more creative thinking and human-centric sort of behaviour in our schools. Are there ways, though, to teach and assess this stuff without using AI and computers? I know a lot of teachers out there get very tired of going through all these essays and things like that. Are they using ChatGPT and things like that to mark and assess?
Oh, it depends on the school and the teacher,
Of
for
course,
sure.
yeah.
There's an Australian researcher named Leon Furs that's created an assessment scale where he says, look, an assignment or a task can be used with no AI, and you were asking the no AI question. Well, sure, you can go back to paper and pencil. You can do an oral task, which are a little bit frustrating to schedule and that sort of thing, but you can do that. You can redesign an assignment so there's a spontaneous performance, or you can build and you can tinker with things. But you can use no AI, but you can also just use it for the planning phase,
Yeah.
so that they're planning the projects. Or, he says, and I agree, you can use it as a collaborator tool. I can't get this paragraph right, or I can't get to see, I've dropped my egg, the famous egg drop, 20 times, and I can't figure out what's wrong, and you can use it as a collaborator. You can use it as full AI, which has its problems, but also just AI for exploration. So yes, you can go without using AI, but what I would argue is to be cautious about the binary thinking, AI or no AI.
Yeah, agreed. It's not binary. It's like saying I'm going to write an essay, or I'm going to do an investigation or a science project, and I'm not going to use any encyclopedias.
Yes.
I'm not going to use any papers.
It could be interesting, but you might be making some stories up there.
Any papers that have been in scientific journals, I'm going to ignore those. And so, in fact, we can use AI to investigate and summarise some of those scientific journals, saving precious time.
Yeah.
So saving precious time and accelerating our learning and speed of learning. What about parents? And finally, tell us that.
Sure.
I know it's worthy of its own show, but talk to us about what should parents know immediately to help their children.
Well, look, I guess if you think about the future of your child, the World Economics Report from 2025 to 2030 talked about the top skill being analytics, being able to analyze data, do analytic thinking. It's also talking about the job skills that students need are resilience and motivation and self-awareness, and those things we refer to as soft skills, but they're very important. So you'll see those in schools and the projects and the things that they do. But the great news is you can do some of that at home. You can experiment with them using ChatGPT. If you don't know what to cook for dinner, you can help them go to the refrigerator, pick out 4 core ingredients, and see what ChatGPT comes up with for a menu.
Yeah. I have done that. It's been fun.
Really?
Yeah, and then have them analyze, can we do this? Should we put chocolate with chicken?
Great.
What does Mexican mole look like? You can you can do all of those things, but then also just those conversations that you have with them of, is it true, is it not? Those conversations are so important.
Yeah, and so are conversations like the one we've had on the program today. And we want to thank you for joining us, helping us unpack this seemingly impossible task. But I appreciate your time, Janet, and thank you for joining us.
I reckon we'll be talking about this a fair bit in the future, Mike Loader.
Oh yeah, we'll be back. Guys, just a reminder that this program was brought to you by the team at Inquiry Tracker. Want to discover how this powerful software can transform your school's operations? Visit inquirytracker.net to learn more. That's the program for now. Until next time.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.